There's a moment when you realize you're trapped in an argument with someone who will never understand your point, never acknowledge facts, and never change their mind regardless of evidence. In that moment, you have two choices. Continue wasting your energy trying to educate the uneducable, or recognize that you're playing a game you can't win and extract yourself strategically. Most intelligent people make the fatal mistake of believing that logic, facts, and reason will eventually prevail in any discussion. They think that if they just explain clearly enough, provide enough evidence, or break down their argument into simple enough terms, even the most stubborn person will eventually see reason. This belief destroys their time, energy, and sanity. Machiavelli understood something that modern psychology has confirmed. Arguing with certain types of people is not just futile, it's strategically damaging. You're not engaging in a rational exchange of ideas. You're feeding energy to someone who thrives on conflict, confusion, and chaos. You're allowing them to drag you down to their level where they have years of experience operating. Here's what elite minds understand. Your time and mental energy are your most valuable resources. Every minute spent arguing with someone incapable of rational thought is a minute stolen from productive activities, meaningful relationships, and personal growth. It's not about being elitist or dismissive. It's about being strategic with your most precious assets. The truly powerful don't argue with fools because they understand that winning an argument with an intelligent person is difficult, but winning an argument with a stupid person is impossible. The stupid person doesn't even understand they've lost, so victory becomes meaningless. Today you're going to learn the elite strategy for identifying these unwinnable situations, extracting yourself without damage, and redirecting your energy toward interactions that actually matter. Because the mark of true intelligence isn't winning every argument, it's knowing which arguments are worth having in the first place. The first thing you must understand is why intelligent people get trapped in arguments with people who can't be reasoned with. It's not stupidity on their part. It's a psychological trap that exploits the very qualities that make them intelligent: their belief in logic, their desire to be understood, and their assumption that others share their commitment to truth. Machiavelli observed this pattern in political negotiations. He noticed that the most educated and rational advisors often became frustrated when dealing with rulers who made decisions based on emotion, superstition, or pure stubbornness. These advisors would exhaust themselves trying to present logical arguments to people who were fundamentally immune to logic. The rationality assumption: intelligent people assume others are operating from the same framework they are, that evidence matters, that consistency matters, that being proven wrong is valuable feedback rather than personal attack. This assumption is their first mistake. The rationality assumption: intelligent people assume unumtary. Not everyone values truth over comfort, facts over feelings, or accuracy over winning. When you enter an argument believing the other person shares your commitment to rational discourse, you're already at a disadvantage because you're playing by rules they don't acknowledge. They're not trying to find truth, they're trying to be right, to dominate, or simply to waste your time. The teaching compulsion: smart people often feel compelled to educate others. They believe that ignorance is simply a lack of information that can be corrected through patient explanation. This noble impulse becomes a trap when dealing with willful ignorance. People who don't want to learn because learning would require admitting they were wrong. You can't teach someone who doesn't want to be taught. You can't reason with someone who isn't reasoning. You can't win a logical argument with someone who abandoned logic before the conversation started. The sunk cost trap: once intelligent people have invested time and energy in an argument, they feel compelled to continue because walking away feels like admitting defeat. They think, I've already spent 20 minutes explaining this. Surely 5 more minutes will make them understand. But this is classic sunk cost fallacy. The time you've already wasted is gone regardless of what you do next. Continuing to waste more time doesn't recover the time already lost. It just compounds the damage. The ego involvement: Perhaps most dangerously intelligent people often take it personally when someone rejects their clearly superior logic. Their ego becomes invested in proving they're right, which transforms a potentially strategic withdrawal into an emotional battle they feel they must win. The moment your ego gets involved, you've already lost the strategic game, even if you win the logical argument. The key to avoiding pointless arguments is learning to identify the warning signs early, before you've invested significant time and energy in a conversation that's doomed from the start. These signs reveal that you're dealing with someone who is fundamentally immune to reason, evidence, and logical discourse. Machiavelli was a master at reading people quickly to determine whether negotiation was possible or whether force would be necessary. He understood that some minds could be changed through persuasion, while others were so fixed in their positions that attempting persuasion was a waste of valuable time and resources. Warning sign 1. They argue conclusions, not evidence. When you present facts, they respond with their opinion as if it carries equal weight. When you cite sources, they cite their feelings. When you show data, they share anecdotes. They're not evaluating your evidence. They're defending their predetermined conclusion, regardless of what you present. This reveals that they've already decided what they believe and are working backward to justify it, rather than examining evidence to reach a conclusion. No amount of additional evidence will change a mind that wasn't formed by evidence in the first place. Warning sign 2. They move the goalposts constantly. Every time you address their concern or answer their question, they immediately shift to a new objection. You prove point A, so they focus on point B. You address point B, so they return to point A as if you never discussed it. This isn't genuine inquiry. It's a defensive mechanism to avoid admitting they might be wrong. People who are genuinely interested in truth will acknowledge when you've made a valid point, even if they still disagree overall. People who are only interested in being right will never acknowledge any point that weakens their position. Warning sign 3. They attack you personally instead of addressing your argument. When they start focusing on your character, your motives, your background, or your right to have an opinion, they've revealed that they can't attack your actual position. Ad hominem attacks are the last refuge of someone who knows they're losing on the merits. This shift to personal attacks shows they're not engaging with your ideas. They're trying to discredit you as a person, so they can dismiss everything you say without having to think about it. Warning sign 4. They repeat the same points after you've already addressed them. It's as if they didn't hear your response, or they're hoping that repetition will make their argument stronger. This indicates either a complete lack of listening skills or a deliberate strategy to waste your time. The quick test. Ask them directly, what evidence would it take to change your mind about this? If they can't answer or say nothing would change their mind, you're dealing with someone who's immune to reason. Most people underestimate the true cost of arguing with unreasonable people because they only consider the immediate time lost. But the real damage goes far deeper. These interactions drain your mental energy, damage your emotional state, and create opportunity costs that compound over time. Understanding these hidden costs is crucial for making strategic decisions about where to invest your attention. Machiavelli understood that a leader's attention and energy were finite resources that had to be allocated strategically. He observed that rulers who allowed themselves to be drawn into endless debates with every critic and contrarian soon found themselves with no energy left for important decisions and productive activities. Mental energy depletion. Arguing with unreasonable people doesn't just waste time. It exhausts your cognitive resources. Your brain burns glucose, trying to formulate logical responses to illogical statements, searching for evidence to counter emotional positions, and maintaining patience in the face of deliberate obtuseness. This mental fatigue affects your performance in other areas. For hours afterward, you have less creativity for problem solving, less patience for important relationships, and less strategic thinking capacity for decisions that actually matter. One pointless argument can reduce your effectiveness for the entire day. Emotional contamination. Frustrating interactions create emotional residue that contaminates other areas of your life. You carry the irritation home to your family. You bring the stress to important meetings. You lose sleep, replaying the conversation and thinking of better responses you should have given. This emotional contamination is particularly toxic because it's completely unproductive. Unlike stress from challenging but meaningful work, the stress from pointless arguments serves no purpose and generates no value. Opportunity cost multiplication. Every minute spent in a pointless argument is a minute not spent on activities that could advance your goals, build your skills, or strengthen important relationships. But the true opportunity cost is multiplied because these arguments often happen during your peak energy hours, when you could be most productive. Consider the compounding effect. If you spend 1 hour arguing with someone who will never change their mind, you're not just losing 1 hour, you're losing the potential value that hour could have created, plus the reduced effectiveness in subsequent hours due to mental fatigue. Reputation damage. When others observe you engaging in heated arguments with unreasonable people, they don't see someone defending truth. They see someone who lacks the judgment to choose their battles wisely. Your professional reputation suffers when colleagues watch you get dragged into pointless conflicts. Elite performers are known for their strategic thinking and emotional control. When you consistently engage with people who can't be reasoned with, you signal that you lack both qualities. The strategic alternative. Every moment you don't waste on pointless arguments is a moment you can invest in meaningful conversations with reasonable people, productive work that advances your goals, or personal development that increases your capabilities. Once you've identified that you're dealing with someone who can't be reasoned with, the next challenge is extracting yourself from the conversation without appearing weak, rude, or defeated. Elite minds have developed sophisticated strategies for this extraction that preserve their dignity, maintain their reputation, and redirect their energy toward productive activities. Machiavelli emphasized the importance of strategic withdrawal when victory was impossible or too costly. He understood that sometimes the most powerful move was refusing to play a game you couldn't win, rather than exhausting yourself in a futile struggle that served your opponent's purposes. Strategy 1. The polite redirect. Instead of continuing the argument or abruptly ending it, redirect the conversation toward practical next steps or areas of potential agreement. I think we see this differently. Let's focus on what we need to accomplish here. This acknowledges the disagreement without validating their approach or continuing the unproductive exchange. This strategy works because it shifts the frame from debate to collaboration, making it harder for them to continue arguing without appearing obstructive. Strategy 2. The time constraint. Use legitimate time pressures to create a natural exit. I need to get to another meeting, but let's continue this when we both have more time to think through the details. This allows you to leave without appearing to flee from the argument. The key is that your time constraint should be real, and your offer to continue should be vague enough that you can later decide whether it's worth scheduling. Strategy 3. The expertise deflection. When appropriate, redirect them to another source of information or authority. This is really expert's name's area of expertise. Have you discussed this with them? This removes you from the position of having to convince them, while implying that the topic requires more specialized knowledge than a casual conversation can provide. Strategy 4. The thoughtful pause. You've given me a lot to think about. Let me process this and get back to you. This appears respectful and considerate, while giving you time to decide whether any follow-up is worthwhile. Most unreasonable people will either forget about the conversation or move on to arguing with someone else. Strategy 5. The strategic agreement. Find something minor you can agree with and use it to end the conversation. You're absolutely right that this is important. I'm going to think about the best way to approach it. This satisfies their need to be acknowledged without conceding any major points. The golden rule: never explain why you're ending the conversation. Don't say this isn't productive or we're not getting anywhere. This just invites more argument about whether the argument is worth having. Simply use one of these strategies and redirect your attention elsewhere. The mark of elite thinking is knowing when to engage and when to withdraw. Strategic withdrawal preserves your resources for battles worth fighting. One of the most powerful weapons against unreasonable people is something they can't argue with: silence. When someone is determined to be irrational, your words become ammunition they can twist, misinterpret, or use against you. But silence is bulletproof. It gives them nothing to work with while preserving your energy and maintaining your dignity. Machiavelli understood that silence was often more powerful than speech. He observed that rulers who spoke less were perceived as more thoughtful and authoritative, while those who felt compelled to respond to every provocation appeared weak and reactive. Strategic silence demonstrated control and confidence. The silence strategy. When someone makes an unreasonable statement or launches into an illogical argument, don't feel obligated to respond. Let their words hang in the air. Maintain calm eye contact. Allow the awkwardness to build. Most people are so uncomfortable with silence that they'll fill it themselves, often revealing more about their true motivations or lack of reasoning. This silence serves multiple purposes. It avoids giving them the argument they're seeking. It makes them responsible for filling the conversational void, and it often causes them to over-explain or contradict themselves without any effort from you. The psychological effect. Unreasonable people thrive on reaction. They want to provoke you, to get you emotional, to drag you into their chaos. When you refuse to engage, you deprive them of the energy they're seeking. Your silence communicates that their provocation isn't worth responding to. This creates cognitive dissonance for them. They expect argument, resistance, emotional reaction. When they get calm silence instead, it forces them to question whether their approach is working or whether you're operating from a position of strength they don't understand. The power dynamic. In any conversation, the person who needs the interaction less holds more power. When you can remain silent while they feel compelled to keep talking, explaining, or justifying, you've demonstrated that you don't need their approval, understanding, or agreement. This shift in power dynamic often causes them to become more reasonable as they try to regain your engagement. Practical application. This doesn't mean becoming completely mute. Respond to reasonable points and genuine questions. But when they make statements that are clearly designed to provoke or positions that are obviously illogical, simply don't take the bait. A slight nod, a non-committal, or complete silence communicates that you've heard them without validating their approach. The strategic advantage. Silence forces them to reveal their hand completely. When you're not providing counter-arguments, they have to fill the space with their own thoughts, often exposing the weakness of their position or the irrationality of their approach. They essentially argue themselves into corners without any help from you. Your silence becomes their mirror, reflecting their unreasonableness back at them in a way that argument never could. The ultimate elite strategy is prevention, creating systems and boundaries that minimize your exposure to pointless arguments before they begin. This requires developing what Machiavelli would call strategic intelligence, the ability to assess people and situations quickly to avoid wasting resources on unproductive interactions. Machiavelli advised rulers to surround themselves with advisors who could engage in meaningful discourse and to limit access for those who would waste the ruler's time with trivial disputes or irrational demands. The most successful leaders protected their mental energy as carefully as they protected their physical resources. Environmental design. Structure your environment to naturally filter out time wasters and attention seekers. This means being selective about which meetings you attend, which social media platforms you engage with, and which conversations you allow yourself to be drawn into. Create barriers that require people to demonstrate good faith and rational thinking before they gain access to your time. Professional environments often force interactions with unreasonable people, but you can still control how much mental energy you invest. Set clear boundaries about which topics you'll discuss and which you won't. Have prepared responses for common provocations that allow you to redirect or exit without getting drawn in. The qualification process. Before engaging in any potentially contentious discussion, quickly assess whether the person is capable of rational discourse. Ask a few preliminary questions to gauge their openness to evidence, their willingness to acknowledge valid points, and their ability to separate emotion from logic. If they fail this informal assessment, keep the interaction purely transactional. Complete whatever business needs to be done, and avoid any topics that could lead to argument. Energy budgeting. Treat your mental energy like a finite budget that must be allocated strategically. Just as you wouldn't spend your financial budget on worthless purchases, don't spend your energy budget on worthless arguments. Ask yourself, will engaging with this person advance any of my goals or create any meaningful value? If the answer is no, treat the interaction like any other poor investment. Avoid it entirely or minimize your exposure. The network effect. Surround yourself with people who value rational discourse and intellectual honesty. When your regular social and professional circles consist of people who can engage thoughtfully with complex topics, you naturally encounter fewer opportunities for pointless arguments. This isn't about creating an echo chamber where everyone agrees with you. It's about creating an environment where disagreement leads to productive discussion, rather than circular arguing. Time sovereignty. Remember that your time belongs to you, not to anyone who demands it. You don't owe anyone a debate, an explanation, or a response to their provocations. Protecting your time and energy from energy vampires and time wasters isn't selfish. It's essential for maintaining your effectiveness and well-being. The elite understand that. Saying no to unproductive interactions is saying yes to meaningful ones. Sometimes, you can't avoid interacting with unreasonable people. Professional obligations, family dynamics, or legal requirements may force you into situations where complete extraction isn't possible. In these cases, you need strategies that minimize damage while maintaining your sanity and protecting your reputation. Machiavelli understood that even the most powerful rulers sometimes had to deal with difficult personalities they couldn't simply dismiss. The key was engaging in a way that served your purposes while refusing to be drawn into their emotional chaos or logical fallacies. Strategy 1. The gray rock method. Make yourself as uninteresting and unreactive as possible. Give minimal responses, show little emotion, and avoid providing anything they can use to escalate the situation. Answer questions with facts, not opinions. Respond to provocations with neutral acknowledgement rather than defensive reactions. This strategy works because most unreasonable people feed off drama and emotional reactions. When you become boring and unresponsive, they often lose interest and direct their energy elsewhere. Strategy 2. The broken record technique. Choose one simple factual statement and repeat it calmly, regardless of how they try to redirect the conversation. I need the report by Friday. When they argue about why Friday is unreasonable, respond, I understand your concerns. I need the report by Friday. When they try to negotiate or create drama, repeat, the deadline is Friday. This technique prevents you from being drawn into circular arguments while clearly communicating your position. Strategy 3. The documentation approach. In professional settings, document everything. Send follow-up emails summarizing conversations, keep records of what was agreed upon, and copy relevant parties when necessary. This serves two purposes. It protects you from false accusations, and it often makes unreasonable people more reasonable because they know their behavior is being recorded. Strategy 4. The audience awareness. When other people are present, focus your communication on the reasonable observers rather than the unreasonable person. Speak clearly and professionally, present facts calmly, and let the contrast between your behavior and theirs speak for itself. The audience will quickly identify who is being reasonable and who isn't. Strategy 5. The time limitation. Set clear time boundaries for any interaction. I have 10 minutes to discuss this. When the time is up, end the conversation regardless of where it stands. This prevents them from wearing you down through extended harassment. The mental shield. Throughout any forced interaction, maintain psychological distance. Remind yourself that their irrationality is their problem, not yours. You're not responsible for their emotions, their logic, or their behavior, only for your own professional conduct. Your goal isn't to win or to change their mind. Your goal is to complete whatever business is necessary while preserving your energy and reputation. When you consistently apply these elite strategies, something powerful happens. You develop a reputation as someone who doesn't engage in pointless arguments. This reputation becomes a protective shield that prevents many potential conflicts before they start. People learn that trying to bait you into irrational debates is a waste of their time. Machiavelli understood that reputation was one of the most valuable assets a leader could possess. A reputation for wisdom and strategic thinking meant that fewer people would attempt to waste your time with trivial disputes, and more people would approach you with genuine respect and meaningful conversations. The reputation development process. Your reputation builds through consistent behavior over time. Every time you refuse to engage with unreasonable arguments, every time you extract yourself gracefully from pointless debates, every time you maintain your composure while others lose theirs, you're building credibility as someone who operates at a higher level. People start to notice patterns. They see that you don't get drawn into drama, that you focus on productive outcomes, and that you treat your time as valuable. This attracts the attention of other high-quality people, while discouraging time wasters and attention seekers. The deterrent effect. Once you've established this reputation, many potential arguments never happen. People who might have tried to provoke you into pointless debates realize it won't work and don't bother trying. Energy vampires move on to easier targets. Drama creators find more willing participants. This creates a positive feedback loop, where your environment becomes increasingly populated with reasonable people who value productive discourse. Professional advantages. In work environments, this reputation translates into significant advantages. Colleagues and superiors begin to see you as someone who focuses on solutions rather than problems, who maintains professionalism under pressure, and who doesn't waste time on office politics or meaningless conflicts. You become known as the person who gets things done without drama, which makes you more valuable for important projects and leadership opportunities. The magnetic effect. Ironically, by refusing to argue with unreasonable people, you become more attractive to reasonable ones. Intelligent, rational people prefer to engage with others who share their values of logic, evidence, and productive discourse. Your reputation for avoiding pointless arguments signals that conversations with you will be worthwhile. Maintaining the standard. Once you've built this reputation, maintaining it becomes easier because people's expectations of you have changed. They expect you to be rational, strategic, and focused. Meeting these expectations reinforces your reputation and continues to attract high-quality interactions while repelling low-quality ones. The long-term compound effect. Over years, this reputation becomes one of your most valuable professional and personal assets. It saves you countless hours of wasted time, reduces stress, improves the quality of your relationships, and positions you as someone who operates at an elite level of emotional and intellectual maturity. When you fully integrate these principles, you transcend individual tactics and develop what can only be called an elite mindset. You begin to automatically assess every interaction for its potential value, every conversation for its productive potential, and every person for their capacity for rational discourse. This becomes your default operating system, not something you have to consciously apply. Machiavelli wrote that the highest form of strategic thinking was when wisdom became instinctive, when you no longer had to deliberate about every tactical decision, because you had internalized the principles so completely that correct choices became automatic. This is the ultimate goal, making strategic thinking your natural response to all social and professional situations. The automatic assessment. You develop the ability to quickly evaluate whether someone is worth engaging with in depth. Within the first few exchanges, you can identify their communication style, their openness to evidence, their emotional regulation, and their capacity for productive disagreement. This assessment happens unconsciously, allowing you to adjust your interaction style immediately. This isn't about being judgmental or dismissive. It's about being efficient with your most valuable resources: time, energy, and attention. The energy optimization, your default, becomes directing your intellectual and emotional energy toward people and situations that offer the highest return on investment. You naturally gravitate toward conversations that challenge you intellectually, relationships that add value to your life, and projects that advance meaningful goals. Pointless arguments become as foreign to your experience as any other inefficient behavior. You simply don't engage in activities that waste your resources without providing commensurate value. The compound advantage. As this mindset becomes habitual, the compound effects are extraordinary. Your stress levels decrease dramatically because you're no longer emotionally invested in convincing people who can't be convinced. Your productivity increases because you're not losing hours to pointless debates. Your relationships improve because you're investing your social energy in people who reciprocate and appreciate rational discourse. The leadership emergence. People naturally begin to look to you for guidance in decision-making because you demonstrate consistent judgment, emotional regulation, and strategic thinking. Your refusal to engage in petty arguments positions you as someone who operates above the fray, a natural leader who focuses on what matters. The final transformation. Eventually, you reach a state where the idea of arguing with an unreasonable person seems as pointless as arguing with a brick wall. You don't feel tempted, frustrated, or compelled to engage. You simply recognize the situation for what it is and redirect your attention to more productive activities. This is true intellectual freedom, the ability to choose your mental battles based on strategic value rather than emotional impulse. When you master this, you join the ranks of elite thinkers who understand that the highest form of intelligence is knowing what not to think about.